If we do, we appear to be quorate. Would members please indicate in the chat whether they're present, so we can have a quick quorum check, please. It's 20 so far. We need to be 25. Well, then we're not quorate. I'll stand down for 10 minutes, I think. We can leave this open for people to join, can't we?
So Deputy Pampton is also here. He's just logging on at the moment, so he is present.
Deputy Ashes as well, sir.
Right, we still only have 23, I'm afraid.
I'm here, sir. Sorry, I went in yesterday's afternoon meeting, sitting lovely on my own for a minute.
Well done. Deputy Martin, you've just made us quorate.
Oh, well, good for something then, sir. Thank you.
Very well.
Yes, sir, I'm here.
And thank you very much indeed. I think then we're quorate and we can continue. The final item is the in-committee debate requested by the Assistant Chief Minister, the Deputy of St Peter, to discuss general policy in connection with population. Can I remind members, although I'm sure members don't need reminding, that in-committee debates Standing Order 97 applies. So unlike usual states debates, each member can speak more than once. And there is no vote at the conclusion of any discussions. I will shortly call upon the Deputy of St Peter to start the debate, and at the end of the time allocated for it, I will ask him to sum up to the extent he wishes, simply to draw the debate to a conclusion. The normal time limits on speeches apply, but of course members can, if need be, speak more than once. The Deputy of St Peter.
Hello, Barney and Teddy.
And the Minister of Treasury and Resources and the Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel are main responders and have been given the opportunity to speak for more than 15 minutes at a time. Of course, members, as I've said, just can speak on more than one occasion if need be. We were scheduled to start tomorrow, and I allocated a full day for this debate on the basis that members wish to take that time to fully express their views. And I will allow the same time, that is within my discretion. So the maximum time allowed for this in-committee debate is from now until 5:30 today, and then from 9:30 tomorrow until 12:45. And that's when the in-committee debate will end. And I think we're ready then to proceed. So we start with the Deputy of St Peter.
Thank you, sir. Firstly, let me thank members for agreeing to hold this in-committee debate on a common population policy, and you, sir, for allocating a generous amount of time to what I think we all agree is an important debate, not just for the members of this Assembly, but for all islanders. In advance of this debate, the Chief Minister lodged Report R41 2021, which gives some background information for the debate and which I hope members have found useful in gathering their thoughts. To meet P120 and to have a debate on a common population policy by the end of the year, I and we need to move quickly, and your views at this stage will provide valuable initial input towards achieving this deadline. I thought it might be helpful to first garner the Assembly's views on the themes that are important to them for a population policy, and then in a second session tomorrow morning to debate the tensions that might exist between these themes and how they might be balanced in a common population policy. I intend to carry out a content analysis of this debate to highlight those areas that are important to the Assembly and to take these forward into our consultation process. I look forward to your open and candid speeches in sharing both your priorities and how we can collectively address the key tensions being our finances, our society and our environment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy St Peter. Before I open the debate, I would just mention that so members can speak more than once if they wish. I will of course give priorities to calling on those members who have not yet spoken, and we'll deal with it in the same way that we normally do when people can ask more than one question. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. And I hope you are hearing, because my...
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay, I'm not going to put my camera on because it dropped out when I did that, so I don't know what's going on with my internet access. Thank you, sir. It's a very interesting idea to have a public in-committee debate on this subject, one which perhaps is the most talked about, an area that's seen as perhaps the biggest issue and perhaps the cure to all our ills. But I want to voice a word of caution around this debate very early on and any future policy. Population is a little like exercise. We all know it must be addressed, but too often we ignore it and hope that it will be fine. And when we do address the issue, we must do so with thought to ensure that we are taking the correct actions. If we take the correct approach, it improves our lives. If we do not get it right, we can cause more harm than good. There's a lot more to population policy than simple numbers. We are an island that is in a particular position with population. Many islands have the issue of falling populations. We are the opposite, and subsequently we face the challenge of space, resource and all the areas of public service required for a modern society. In short, we face unique challenges. So what is needed in this policy? We must identify the pressures that are leading to changes in our population. Is it purely migration? Is it birth rate? Is it that people are living longer? Until we know the pressures and the balance of these pressures, we cannot create a solution. So we must have detailed research and use the data from the census to inform our and direct our population policy. Our latest census only took place on Sunday. Any changes to the makeup of our island and the people that live here will have knock-on effects. We must understand these effects and enter the change with open eyes. And we cannot deny the political drivers behind any population policy. We do not find such a policy as a naturally occurring entity. It is created by our political representatives, and those who lead change must take responsibility. We need to decide on the nature of our society. What do we want for the residents of Jersey? I would say that we must have a society built upon the skilled workforce, one where every member of our community has values and can expect to be valued. We must be a modern, living wage, highly skilled society. That is if we are going to have any chance of controlling our population and provide for the needs of all our residents. We need some realism around our population. If we are to limit it in any way, we must ensure we educate throughout people's lives. We must offer the chance to retrain and gain skills to provide the services and economy we need. And we need to anticipate and be proactive around changes to work processes. I'm sure many will mention artificial intelligence and the possible long-term effects of on employment. And we need to decide whether this will lead to fewer people working the same number of hours or similar numbers working less with greater access to leisure and family time. These are huge political questions that any policy will affect. One of the most divisive features of any community is inequality. Any policy must not create tiers within our society. Economic division and rampant inequality are not good for quality life, particularly on a small island. I understand the pride in those who were born in Jersey, but we are a diverse island and we must have equal pride in all our communities. Any population policy must address this with understanding, clarity and sensitivity to the wider world beyond our shores. The most obvious area for policy to impact is in the realm of housing. And unless we address the overall standards of our homes, the spiralling cost and the motive of profit that drives the rigged market, population policy alone will not solve the issue. We need a fair taxation system, a system of one tax regime with common thresholds, one where we pay our fair share according to our ability to pay and to have support when we need it. As the pandemic has shown, certainty only comes from strong support from the state. Our health service must be accessible to all. Public health must be at the centre of this, and this link to access to healthy food, space to exercise, health and well-being, education, and the ability to balance home and work life is essential. For too many working long hours for perhaps more than one job, this is a dream that cannot be realised. Sustainability is the key concept that must be at the heart of any population policy in terms of land use, green space, water resources, energy use, food security and many other areas that are seen as environmental factors. I want to see clear definitions of sustainability and that this is one of the limiting factors. Excuse me, sir, someone knocked on my door. I just rang the bell. I should ignore the doorbell. Long-term factors such as climate change and the wider context of Jersey on the world stage are vital. At a conference during the lunch break, I'm trying to balance the two things on climate justice and security. I heard that 1.2 billion people are at risk of displacement in the world due to climate change by 2050. Jersey is at risk from climate change, both physically and in terms of the nature of finance and the green economy and investment into the future. Yes, we need to address population. As a deputy of St Helier, we seem to face the most development for housing, and it is here I would finish. Population policy must be fair, flexible and designed to suit the needs of the majority with genuine sustainability at the heart. If we get this right, we have the chance to build a better for the future. If we get this wrong, it will be the future generations that will pay. I hope the government will be inclusive in the development of its population policy of members across the Assembly, the political spectrum and background. I look forward to the debate and look forward to hearing others' thoughts as well, sir. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy. Who else would now like to speak? Going to be an extremely short debate if nobody indicates a desire to speak. Very well, if no member wishes to speak in this in-committee debate. Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. That could have been embarrassing, couldn't it? And I've put myself forward to speak purely so the debate doesn't get shortened, and may have to keep it a short one now and speak a second time. But I think that Deputy Ward has made some really important points in his opening speech, which I think was really excellent. And just looking at the report we're provided to help us guide our way through this debate, and asking for this first part to describe our visions for Jersey over the next 5, 10, 20 years time, and how a common population policy would help achieve that aim. I think one thing I'd add to what Deputy Ward has said is that I'd like to hope that the years ahead of us are nothing like the years we've just had. I'm of the view that Jersey has essentially had a wasted decade. Post the financial crash, however some may wish to paint those years, they were not good years for Jersey, and we have not recovered from that crash in a way that ordinary people in Jersey can claim has benefited them. And I think all the statistics bear this out. I've been doing some research recently on affordable housing and how the cost of housing has changed over that decade. And I think that's probably where I'd mostly want to focus on for my contribution in these debates, because housing really is a fundamental issue for people's well-being in the island. And it, of course, is drastically affected by population policy because of the demands that can put on us to provide decent homes for everybody, on a relatively small landmass where there are competing interests in what parts of the island we try to preserve. You know, we all want to preserve as much of our countryside and coastline as possible, and some would prefer to pile homes in St Helier, and that's all well and good, but only if you're genuinely providing decent, affordable homes there with good amenity facilities and open green space there, and those things seem to be all too forgotten about all too often, unfortunately. So I think in looking to how we proceed in future years, we do have to be real about the previous years that have got us to this situation, that I think have been a combination of bad luck, because we didn't cause the financial crash, we didn't ask for it to happen, and so how the government had to react to that was never going to be ideal. But it is the case that we've become a more unequal society in that time, and it is the case that in the short periods of time in that decade where we've had economic growth, it has been driven by population growth, where real terms earnings have been frozen in that decade. Productivity has not been the driving force in that economic growth. It was population growth, and that's unsustainable. There comes a point where we just won't be able to maintain a basic standard of living for people here, making sure we've got enough places in schools, making sure we've got enough schools, and that people can actually manage their days effectively in dropping their kids off and picking them up whilst being able to work, whilst not contributing to traffic congestion and all the rest of this. And those are issues we're going to have to really think hard about and be conscious of when setting a population policy. And in many of those years leading up until now, we've either not had a population policy in place, or we've had an interim population policy that was more or less ignored. And so one of the lessons that's got to be learned in putting a new common population policy together is that it's actually got to be realistic, and we have got to provide ourselves with the means of actually applying it. And that means being wary of what sorts of talent and skills we're going to need to have come into the island. Not all of those will be high earning jobs or business leaders or innovators. Lots of those are likely to be jobs like carers. We know we're going to need more people working in that area in the future, or people working in the health system, something that's vitally important to our well-being as a society, but which is often not particularly high earning. And understanding that the value that people contribute to the island when they are here is not defined purely by how much tax they end up paying. And whilst we're talking about tax, I think we'll also have to understand that part of our future has to be based on having a fairer tax system, so that the people who are here are contributing properly to our public services, and we don't rely on this really bizarre system we have of high net worth individuals that come to the island, and we boast about how much tax they pay here that they otherwise wouldn't be paying, as if that's something to be proud of, as if supplementing our tax income by having a relatively small number of super wealthy people who come and have a distorting economic impact whilst they're here is clearly a broken system. And so I'd like to think that at some point in the next few years, we can develop some sort of population model and tax model that doesn't claim to have that sort of reliance on those sorts of people whose contribution is, I think, not what people think it is. So partly because I want to hear what other people want to say, I'll stop speaking now, but I may have a think about contributing some other points further on based on what people have said. But I think the main gist of what I've said at the beginning of this debate is to add to what Deputy Ward said and say that we do need to consider the things that have gone wrong over the last 10 years if we're to know how we move forward. And that will mean reaching some conclusions that will probably be inconvenient for the people who are in charge of those, of delivering on those mistakes in those years. But we have to get real if we want to move forward properly. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Senator Conatable St Mary. Conatable St Mary.
Thank you, sir. I was just having a bit of trouble with the buttons. Population control is not about keeping people out. We need people with skills in order to have a variable economy. We need health workers. We need semi-skilled workers to service the low-paid industries, which local unemployed find it beneath them to work in. It is getting harder to attract these people to the island. We need an incentive to do that. It is the same incentive which we need to exploit in order to stop our young people leaving this island for a more lucrative alternative elsewhere. That incentive is housing. We need to supply realistically priced housing to our lower paid and essential workers, either rental or first-time buyer. It may be that we need to have a two-tier system whereby certain categories of people are eligible for this realistically priced housing. In the case of first-time buyer housing, this should remain in that sector, not be sold on for profit. If it must be sold on, this should only be with cost of living increase only and returned into that sector. Our greatest problem with a population policy is still a lack of adequate housing. We need housing now. First-time buyer housing could be produced at half the market price. We need to do that, and we can do that. It may mean a radical rethink on how we produce the product. By that I mean a design change. Flat pack housing. It's the only way to go for realistically affordable first-time buyer housing. This is not a solution for all housing, but this should be considered for a certain category. Small groups of housing which could be absorbed in most parishes. We don't have enough skilled tradespeople on the island to produce the housing required in a conventional build. We would have to poach these people in from mostly the UK. This would only add to our problems. But we could produce flat pack housing on island using our local back-to-work people in a factory-type unit with people completing a small part of each process, thereby gaining a multitude of skills and reward for doing so. It may be that we need to provide work permits for certain categories of people, those who we actually need to bring in, who are considered essential. Housing status is a massive incentive for anyone wishing to make a life in Jersey. It is a commitment on behalf of that person to remain in Jersey. It is also a commitment to work for the benefit of Jersey, enhancing our communities. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Conatable. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I didn't plan to speak early in the debate, but Conatable speech prompt, and I would like to make 2 points currently, and I might come back. First of all, I do agree. We all know that we have big housing problems, but what I would like to look at is to address inconsistencies between work permits and housing qualifications. Whatever we will decide, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, it should be consistency between people where they can work and where they can live. What I mean, for example, if somebody come to Jersey to work under license, during the first 5 years, they can work for the firm that contracted them, and they can live anywhere. After 5 years, they allowed to work anywhere, but if they would like to move a firm to work to different finance firm, for example, they have to leave their house and to find unqualified accommodation. So it's either or they can work for one company and live anywhere, or they can work for anywhere but live in unqualified accommodation where we have problems. And generally, if we decide to go, I personally think that unqualified and qualified for rent might keeping our prices up as well, because we have unqualified accommodations, some of them not the best standard, and they're much more expensive than the qualified ones. And I would like, it's maybe different debate about qualified and unqualified, but for the migration policy, I think, like Constable say, if we have 2 tiers or 3 tiers and we would like to attract people, they need to have good quality accommodation and can allow themselves to find accommodation that's suitable. So consistency. Another inconsistency, and again, this connected to the accommodation. After 5 years, Jersey residents will be entitled for the rent support. And at the same time, they cannot rent qualified accommodation. So they're renting accommodation from private sector, more expensive, and getting rent support for the more expensive accommodation. Something to consider. And the second point that I wanted to raise, whatever we decide about the immigration policy going forward, I want it to make clear, very clear. We are not in any way being critical of the people who already decided to call Jersey their home. Any policy change in no way should disadvantage immigrants who are already here. Jersey must not create a local caste system with the residents born here, not born here. So I feel that after Brexit, it's become increasingly likely that we might have immigrants coming. Maybe we'll have more, we don't know. But whatever needs to be done to fully protect the rights and conditions that people came to the island up to now, it should be done. We cannot sacrifice the rights or well-being of those already here. And I say it's important for me to control the growth of our population. I think we will need the license system. It's just to protect what we have and going forward. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy Serafon.
Thank you, sir. I find it interesting that we always refer to our population policy, our population measures as something to fix. And I think population and the way we manage it presents a great opportunity, a really important opportunity for the future growth and development of the island. I mean, in its simplest form, a population policy is a set of measures for a state to modify the way its population is changing. And I go back to that word, modify. I don't think there's a policy that we can put in place and say, right, we're going to follow this for the next 10 years and then have another one, a bit like a census. This is something, population policy has to evolve. And we have seen our population grow exponentially for a number of different reasons, which I'm not sure if we're going to go into it in the debate today, but some of them beyond our control in relation to the rights of people for residency after periods of time, access to work in Jersey from the European Union. And what I think the opportunity we failed to grasp is how we could have actually done what the new migration plans are suggesting, although I think we might need to fine-tune them, and that is to ensure we can staff our important economic sectors without causing an unsustainable strain on our future population. So we're starting to look at that. I can't underestimate the importance of allowing the skills, I think Constable St Mary alluded to it, the skills necessary to come into the island, not just for financial services, which of course we know is a massive importance to our commerce and our economy and our community, but of course for education and health. And I've learned a lot more about that dealing with the new hospital project there, because how the infrastructure that we put in place, and it was actually, I didn't speak this morning on the office block development, but when we provide good infrastructure, good modern 21st century working environments, we tend to attract the best people. It's a bit of a catch-22 because to put the right infrastructure in place, we need to be able to guess or estimate fairly accurately how our population is going to change. And growing our population isn't necessarily a bad thing as long as we manage it carefully, as long as we ensure we are bringing in the right skills, as long as we ensure we can staff the front lines of our valuable tourism and retail and agricultural sectors without necessarily causing a long-term unsustainable position. So we need we need a policy so we can plan and manage our infrastructure accordingly. I think I might like to speak again, sir, a little bit later, but I just thought I wanted to mention those points and underpin, if I may, sir, at the risk of repeating myself, the importance of modifying our policy. Actually, one of the positive things we can do at the Mo is we have discretion, and that's been helpful. And I know Senator Mezek and I sat at the same table wrestling with policies that are hugely difficult to be consistent with, and we need to straighten that out. But retaining the ability to have discretion to help people, I think, is important. But we mustn't underestimate the importance of growing our population. Managed sustainable growth can be a very good thing, sir. And I use the productivity word because I know Deputy Southern's going to come after me for that. But I mean, that's one of the benefits of improving our productivity. So, for example, improving our economic output, growing our economic outputs, but not needing to grow the resource to produce that economic output at such a level. So I hope that stimulates a bit of debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy St Barton.
Thank you, sir. And this isn't a speech either. It's just a few thoughts that have come to me while I've listened to this first half hour. And at the risk of repetition, it's quite interesting to hear so many people talking about housing in our population debate. And of course, it's right, population and housing are the two most talked about subjects in our community. I think the first thing I'd like to suggest is that we get this. I don't know how much raw data we can extract from the census. It does seem that we have to wait months and months to get data from it. But it would be very useful and helpful to have data from the census so we know where we are. I don't know if anybody's really surely accurate as to how many people have left the island in the last 12 months, but we know some people have. It would be interesting to know where we are currently. I'd just like to agree with Deputy Ward about education, and surely into the future, if we're going to keep our population under control, educating all our children to the best of their abilities has to be one of the keys. We want as many jobs as possible on this island being taken by local people, and there's no reason why we can't do that. But we do have to address education, because if young people can't find jobs, they do two things. They either stay here unemployed or they leave the island. And I'm seeing increasing amounts of young people leaving the island and not coming back. And it's right that housing and the cost of housing, construction, has to be addressed, absolutely. whether it's over 55s, retirement homes, sheltered homes, first-time buyers, shared equity, social housing. We desperately need to build more houses, but it's the cost of those purchases and rents that are starting to drive people away, our young people away, and we need to address that. And the Constable of St Mary's is absolutely right. We need to look off island for ingenious ways of prefabricated buildings. And I know prefab will not be a phrase that people will be comfortable with, but of course these days prefabrication off island could be very, very different to something that we might have seen from prefab factories 30 years ago. I'm just going to finish with this, sir. The thing that terrifies me the most, and I've said this in previous debates on immigration, but the thing that terrifies me the most on this island is depopulation. We do need to increase our population on the island. We need to increase the number of people working, because we know the number of people like myself who are getting older it's going to double in a very short period of time, and those people need to be looked after. So the thing I really, really fear the most is depopulation. And I know that's a difficult one, but I say to people who come up to me and say, we need to be back where we need to be back in 100,000. There's too many people living on the island. I say to them, that's fine. I accept your argument, if you like, that 100,000 is the target model. But you tell me which 6,000 or 7,000 people get on the boat in the morning. And that's where the argument falls down. We cannot, unfortunately, sir, reduce the population of the island. Well, as long as we possibly can't do that. Excuse me. It would be a terrible thing to happen. And I know there's pressures and challenges from an increasing population, but those challenges are by far the best of the type of challenges you can have from population. So I'll just leave it there for now, sir, but I'd just like to say to members, increasing the population of the island is vital, but it's also vital to make sure that that population increase is done as slowly as we possibly can, which is why educating our children to the best of their ability is vital. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy Constable St Brelard.
Thank you, sir. Many of the decisions we make as states members are influenced or should be influenced by a migration policy. The word infrastructure covers a multitude of our island facets, which are all built, financed and maintained.
Constable, I'm afraid the same difficulty as yesterday. You're very faint, and I'm wondering if you can move closer to your microphone or something like that.
I shall try and fellow at it, sir. The word infrastructure covers a multitude of our island facets, which are all built, financed and maintained by us, and those needs are dictated by the numbers resident in the island. I have experienced in a former ministerial role of the burgeoning expansion of our drainage networks, our road networks, utility needs in general, and of course the construction industry and housing. I won't even mention the health needs of an ageing population. The traditional tourism and fisheries industries haven't changed in size. In fact, in many areas, they've contracted, as has the finance industry. We must therefore take great care in any migration or population policy not to exacerbate this situation. Commerce is an essential part of a vibrant society, so we must give it support, but not at the risk of compromising the way of life that we all value. The island is of finite size, and the more selfish will say we like it as it is, don't let any more people in. Others will realise that an ageing population means that on the present trajectory, we'll have insufficient numbers of people contributing to the social security. The answer to this, sir, as is often the case, it's a question of balance. And in order to achieve this, we must establish protocols and policies within which government officers can work. A previous speaker suggested, sir, that we don't have sufficient skills on the island. I would contend that this is due in the main due to inadequate training and provision for the future. You must do more at the education level, more at the further education level, and make it easier for employers to provide on-the-job training. I look forward to hearing contributions from others during the course of the debate, sir.
Thank you very much, Conrad. Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to begin by an apologies to say I haven't prepared a speech, but obviously the whole point of in-committee debates is that we can express our broad canvas of views, and mine are based on my reflections having been in 40 years in Jersey. Obviously, I'm not born in the island, but I've seen from the late 70s, I've seen the transformation of the island, during which time its population has grown from around 80,000 to around 106 or 107,000, which is a 30% increase. And of course, I've also seen the transformation of the quality of life. Jersey at that time when I came to the island was very much closer to the UK in terms of its economics, and therefore wage levels were generally consistent, and the house prices were not absolutely out of order. And of course at that time there was our community enjoyed it. My worry, as I've seen, is that I don't believe, and over the years, over those last decades, various generations of politicians have sought to try and can put a limit, if you like, or set a target, a number. But of course, those things have never worked. Indeed, at one time, there was a time when the states decided they would have no job growth whatsoever, and then actually dived down into a recession because having we put our foot on the brake, we shot downhill very, very fast indeed. And obviously, so they are trying to achieve where that balance is. But I think the starting point, I think, is ask myself, where was the vision of how Jersey should be in the future? What sort of society do we want? What sort of quality of life do we want? What sort of fairness and equity do we want in our societies? And I don't think we've ever had that. And so the growth in population, I don't believe has been, certainly not been planned. It's happened incrementally as a result of our collective economic aspirations. And I think when we ask ourselves the question, well, what do we do going ahead? And certainly I think this is something which should be done, focusing on the next decade or the next 2 decades even. I think this is very much for younger people, because I've enjoyed the periods of really, I think, outstandingly good quality Jersey life. But I seriously worry about future generations. I seriously worry about our young people and their access to homes. I seriously worry about whether or not we can really meet the aspirations, or the needs, not just aspirations, they're the needs of our community aging for our health service. I'm desperately worried about the opportunity for the breadth of education that our young people are going to have, because the world is going to get even more competitive. We're on our own now. We're not in the EU. We've got, tensions internationally. There's the artificial intelligence changing the nature of work. And we need to be able to have those services. And yet what we've got, I'm being frank, we got a broken tax system. A broken tax system that results in a situation of massive inequality. And I think where population, going forward, is not just a question about saying, oh, what's our skills? What's the numbers like? This industry needs this industry needs that. No, this is about having a holistic vision. And so those judgments can be made by political members. And so, why is the tax regime so problematic? Well, what we've had, I think, is that our essential public services have been resource constrained. They're not able to respond to the needs sufficiently flexible. And I think we're in danger of living beyond our means of the physical constraints of the resources we have in the island. We've got a finite land area. Our infrastructures are in many ways at the limits. And so I think now there's a real task to be done here about, if you like, to set a new vision. And I think, okay, people are going to say to me, oh, we've had all that. We've got those. We've had these lovely documents that we produce and publish. We've got these critical factors. We're going to do that, you know. But I'm afraid they're, in reality, motherhood and apple pie. And the difference between the reality and those visions is a very, very wide. And so I think this really needs a fundamental look, root and branch. And I do have a doubt, and I've put this out there. I think I've heard it said that we're going to have this policy all sorted out by the autumn this year, November. We'll certainly know a lot more then. We'll know about the census numbers that tells us kind of where we are. We're likely to know a lot better where our economy is, hopefully on the way out of this dreadful COVID situation. And we will know more about the needs health-wise and so on. We'll know more, but is it likely, with, let's be frank, a dying states and a dying government, because it's only a year, that one could suddenly magically produce those new policies in the dying months? Is it even right? And so I wonder, I just put that out there. I'd like to hear what other members think about that, because to me, this is very much the agenda going forward, which is very long term. And it's really important that I think that people really, I think, have an opportunity during the debates that do happen in the elections, because hopefully we're going to get clarity about party politics. Hopefully we get the new election rules, which will make things a lot more engaged for the public, that this debate can start to happen. And another thought has occurred to me. It occurred to me, and I'll put it there. I mean, I'd like members to think about this. This is so important. It's a whole society issue for the future, particularly young people. Is there a role here? Is there a role here for taking the approach that we've adopted, and it's beginning to look very, very positive, for having a citizens' assembly to come up with a vision, and that way a bottom-up view of, so we can then set goals, because I don't think one starts with population saying, okay, here's the numbers, tick the box, different industries, this, that and the other. I don't think that's the approach. I think it's a fundamental look and a real political choices to be made. And that'll be very, very good if the political parties that are formed take firm positions and enable that debate to happen effectively. So I do apologise, it's not a structured speech. I want you to throw those ideas in and see how they gel or don't gel. And so I deliberately done that to stimulate, but I look forward to hearing that. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy Martin.
Thank you, sir. And I'm sure nobody was holding back, and likewise I wasn't. I sometimes like to listen to other people's views before I can formulate. And again, I've not got a written speech. I have some facts and figures here that I will quote in a minute from the perspective of being the Social Security Minister. But a few comments I'd like to make about a few speeches. I absolutely agree with Deputy Gardner. Anything that we are bringing in cannot be retrospective. It's been tried before. Qualies used to stop, they were 5 years, overnight they went to 10, then they were done away with. It didn't help. We need a good plan. And my concern, and I was on the board, my concern with the overall plan is that as of the 1st of January this year, we have the immigration, which is through the Home Affairs, from everyone now who used to be able to walk into Jersey from Europe, have tests, they have to meet that. And then we're proposing 9 months and 4 years. And to go back to Deputy Gardner again, that will stop people getting to their 5 years of residency. This is a choice. This then, they don't stay, they don't become a part of the island, they don't become they don't qualify for this and that. But who are we going to attract? Because, you know, people do look around the rest of the world, and with the two coming together, I have great concerns. I just say that because it's one of those things. I absolutely understand the education part, but at the moment we've got the largest, I think, unemployment for many years. But probably when the season starts, we've still not got enough unemployed to fill all the jobs that are needed. So, you know, it's one of those things. As Social Security Minister, the population of Jersey that's getting older is already here. They are not the people who are going to probably leave, and why would they? And they have been paying for the generations before them's pensions and healthcare and everything else in their taxes. And when they retire at 65 or 66, you know, that may need to be looked at. But the next generation needs to be paying, the working generation, so needs to be paying for the people who are retiring, and that's the system we work in. So it's, you know, it's very, very concerning to me. I mean, there's more people going to be reaching their 65th birthday in a few years than our children, Jersey-born children, are reaching their 18th birthday when they are probably ready to start work or go off to uni, etc. Fully, you know, I say, you know, I always probably am the party pooper in the room when people say, well, we transfer skills, we cross-skill people, we upskill people, and I say, well, who's going to do the healthcare workers, you know, the dirty work that, you know, the real nitty-gritty that's got to be done? Some blank faces, because these people are doing a job that is absolutely needed because people get older, and unfortunately not all, but some people as they get older need more care, and that's more cost. And then the smaller the working population this end who are supporting those people, what is our tax structure, right? You know, it was mooted by some people that people would be happy with a trade-off, that they wouldn't mind a small increase across the board in tax and social security, etc., if they could see that the population was, you know, maybe, you know, not increasing so much or flattening out. But that actually hasn't been tested. It's all right for us to speak what people might like and might do. I just seem to not get that feel. I'll say, I may speak again, but I just wanted to put those warnings out there. I agree with the Deputy of St Martin's as well. You know, we could be in a worse, we could have a decrease in really quickly decreasing population that some small countries and islands find themselves in, and they are in a worse position. They really are, and going through COVID. And that's the other thing, sir. The new immigration rules under Brexit have not been tested because we've had COVID and we've basically got industries shut. So I don't know if states members are expecting a number that's going to be produced by the end of the year. I would caution on that, whatever way we decide to go, if we all agree, but putting a number on it so soon with all the unknowns, I would be very, very wary of. So that's really all I've got to say. Sorry again, I've gone all over the place, but I wanted to make those comments, and hopefully it's helped some people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Truscott.
Yes, thank you, sir. And this is, really going to be quite a complex debate, and I think we're being asked to provide our vision for Jersey for the next 5, 10 and 20 years. Well, I've got to confess my crystal ball is a little cloudy, and it's cloudy in so much as that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and again, as alluded to this morning, we're in post-Brexit times. About numbers, I think using Deputy of St Peter's analogy about turning on the taps and turning off the taps to control population is absolutely right, and it is about control, I think, going forward with our population control measures. But like a dripping tap, sir, eventually the bath will fill. And I think that is been the problem. By trying to achieve balance, you've always let that dripping tap continue to drip. And I think we have got to make a bold decision at some point
and say, right, well, is it going to be 110,000, for example? And we stick to that. And at that point, it's where data, and the Deputy of St Peter and myself are both aligned on this. It's all about the data. We need to know the ins, and we need to know the outs. And not only that, we need feedback from our business leaders, from the Chamber of Commerce, etc., with projections for future demand going forward. As I say, it's an incredibly complex thing that we're debating here today. Everybody's right. There's so many things that we would like as a society. We're talking about a new hospital, £800 million. We've just given the green light to £100 million office development. There's debate regarding Port Regent, whether we should go off and spend 250 million or whatever the figure is. There's a lot of nice things that we would like, but what is imperative going forward, that we've got a very strong and vibrant economy. And I think the days of low wage is probably coming to an end. I think we are competing now in a very different world, labour. I think if Jersey is going to be able to attract people on a 9-month or a 4-year contract, then certainly the salaries are going to have to be attractive. And obviously we're also vulnerable to things like sterling. Should sterling depreciate significantly going forward, it'll become likewise difficult to attract members of staff from areas where their currency is much stronger. There is the ageing demographic, and as you say, that in itself is going to cause issues and will need to be addressed. It can be addressed. Currently, we're working on quite a low social security contribution. Going into the future, perhaps we'll have to look at charging more those that can afford it to actually contribute to the demographic issue. As you say, there's so many different facets to this. It's difficult in a simple speech that I haven't written, but I'm just going from a few notes to actually put together. It's young children, well, they're not children, more the young adults, but needing housing, and we've all touched on it today. But again, regarding housing, you need a decent job, a decent salary to actually either pay the mortgage or pay the rent. So it is vital, absolutely critical, that we get the economy right. And therefore getting the population right to feed that economy is the big question. So it is about education, and I agree with a number of members that have previously spoken. We do need to grow our own, and I think we've already started a nursing academy, and I think we really need to do more of that. I mean, we're not just talking nursing, we're talking social workers, electricians, and we need good grades coming from our schools so that they can go off to university, come back and earn a good living here. But again, housing is pivotal, because I think if anybody's going to live a fulfilled life in Jersey, I think you really do want to put down your roots and have a roof and a home to call your own, going forward. So I'll leave it there. So as I say, a very complex issue, something I'll listen to other members gain their thoughts on things going forward. Thank you very much.
All right, Deputy Taddeo.
Thank you, sir. This is a very serious subject. I'll start with a little bit of levity before moving on to something slightly more serious with the rest of the speech. So I've circulated a photo that members may have seen already on social media, which is quite amusing. It shows a crossing that's been put in, or the road markings have been redone recently outside Waitrose in St Brelard. And the arrow is pointing the wrong way. So on one side it says keep left, but the arrow is pointing towards the right. And as a couple of commentators on social media commented, they said, oh, it looks like Jersey's government has finally produced and unveiled its radical new population policy to control the population in Jersey. And a lot of people got that. I make a more serious point now, which I think we can all agree with, hopefully, when it comes to this very sensitive issue of population discussions. And that is that I hope we all agree that racism should play no part in the discussion of what Jersey's population should be, how it should be controlled. And that's why I was really disappointed by one political commentator who is asking for candidates to come forward in the next election to see him and to see former Deputy Jackie Hilton, and it's the former housing minister who's a political commentator and who knows might be making a comeback. His comment on that photo was to say probably done by one of Deputy Tadye's foreign recent arrivals who will be standing in next year's elections. And I think it's important to call this kind of thing out publicly, not because I don't have a thick skin and I can take robust political discussion and criticism directly. But when it comes to the insinuation and the directly racist, I don't even think there are undertones. I think it is a completely racist post. The insinuation, of course, here is that a foreign worker coming to Jersey is presumably too thick to know the difference between left and right. And I think those kind of comments from a former housing minister who's no doubt been a political ally of some current members in this assembly, I think is completely disgraceful, because we have to remember that Jersey's long and proud history has been built on the fact that immigrants have been coming to our island, whether it's in the time when maritime pursuits were really popular and the Jersey man and woman made their living from the sea, from fishing, or from the less savoury aspects of privateering or outright piracy. But agriculture, tourism, finance, we've always relied on a healthy inward immigration system. And that's been important, not simply because for the economy, but it's also been really important for the gene pool. And I don't just mean the biological gene pool. I'll refer to the cultural DNA of the island, which has been constantly renewed and transformed by the fact that we are, even though we're a small island, we have this diverse pool of people who choose to call Jersey their home. It's one thing for a Jersey-born person to say, I live here and I'm a proud Jersey person, but we didn't do anything to choose to be here. We just got dealt that card, and many of us stayed and many of us love it. But other people have made a choice to give up something and perhaps to come here either temporarily or in many cases to make Jersey their home. And I think we need to recognise that. And how many times have we heard people say, you know, I came to Jersey, who knows, in the 70s and the 80s, just for a holiday, and I ended up staying. I ended up getting married, and I set up a family, and I've been happy ever since. And there are no doubt people whose ancestors could say, you know what, I came to Jersey in the 1660s, just as a soldier or for whatever other reason, and I stayed because I loved it so much. We do well to recognise that. There isn't a monopoly on Jersey identity, and I think that needs to be said. Moving on, though, I think that the whole area of population discussion does throw up some inherent, or at least, if not inherent contradictions, certainly some tensions. Because if you said to people, your average person, and certainly your average politician or political contender, do you think that we need to do more to control the population? They would say yes, probably. And if you said, do you think the population should remain the same or decrease? Most people, the surveys would say yes. Either they would agree that the population shouldn't increase, and if anything, we could do with a few less people in Jersey. It's one of those, of course, where the person you're asking or the person you're speaking to, they're never the problem, even though they're contributing to population. A bit like traffic on the road, it's always other car drivers who are the problem. It's never yourself. They're the ones holding you up rather than the other way around. But we accept that, that's human nature. But there is an issue here, because of course, if if you said to people, do you think we need to build more housing in the island? They would probably say yes, absolutely. We need to build more housing because we need somewhere for young people or even older people who are trying to downsize to live. Okay, so you want to decrease the population, but you want to increase housing. So how does that work? Because it seems to me that there are natural capacity inhibitors when it comes to population, namely work and accommodation. So if you don't have work and you don't have accommodation, it's probably really difficult to live in Jersey. You could probably live in Jersey without work if you had accommodation, but you'd need to have some way to pay for that or have free accommodation. And if you only had work in Jersey, you could probably get by with sleeping on someone's sofa for a certain amount of time. And I don't not recognise the fact that there is something we call informal homelessness living in Jersey. Sorry, that exists in Jersey. But ultimately, if you don't have somewhere to live and you don't have a job, you're not going to be staying in Jersey very long unless you're very independently wealthy, and then you're probably welcome anyway. You're probably staying in a hotel and you're effectively a tourist. So there is a tension there. So I would say that everybody in Jersey has to live somewhere already, and they may not be particularly well accommodated, and we might need new housing, but presumably we need to get rid of the bad housing as well. So there's a tension there. And I also think that people want mutually exclusive things, that they want to have a low population. Ostensibly, that's what people seem to be coming back with, but they want somebody else, like Deputy Martin said, to do the dirty work, to do the bad jobs, in inverted commas, of course, because we know that all professions are valuable and are noble in many ways. Often the most noble professions are the least well remunerated or the least well respected. And that's the irony, and that's something we have to change. So if we are going down the route of grow your own, what are we saying? Grow your own care workers? Why would somebody who's locally qualified want to be a care worker if, for example, we don't pay their travel time, or if their employer doesn't pay their travel time, if they only have 2 weeks holiday a year, paid holiday? Why would they want to do that when they can get a job with the protected characteristics, for which you have to be here for 5 years in the island, which pays better and has better terms and conditions? If all the other jobs, we don't need that qualification period necessarily, because we want to fill them with lower paid workers with more precarious terms and conditions in terms of their work, in terms of their work contracts. So that brings us back to the point that, yeah, we could have a scenario where we only, we close the borders, and this is obviously an extreme scenario. You close the borders and you say all jobs have to be filled by local people, and let the market decide. So if you can't get a job that you want, your dream job, you have to take your less dreamy job to do. But I think it goes back to the point that people want to be able to earn high wages and then go and sit in a cafe or a restaurant and get, not have to pay a lot of money because they want to be served by someone on low wages. That keeps the cost down. And I think that goes right across the board, right into our agriculture and fishing industries, whereby if we were to truly pay the cost of goods and truly consume local, then we'd probably have to be prepared to pay a lot more money to do it. So I think that brings us back to the point is that, and these are just thoughts. Again, I haven't written a speech, and I think that is probably obvious, but sometimes it's useful to speak off the cuff and listen to what other members have said. And the null hypothesis, if you like, could be, well, why do we have to do anything at all? Well, the answer to that is because it's political suicide. If politicians, I think as former Senator Sivray once said, if politicians were to tell the public the truth, they wouldn't get elected. And that probably goes across the board for environmental issues, etc. But hopefully, similarly, we're not here to try and lie to the public either. And so I think what we need to do is actually look at how we not just manage the numbers of the population, if indeed that's what we're going to do, but how the population are looked after when they're here, to consider their human rights, which I think is going to be fundamental and a very difficult sticking point, I think, for many members in this assembly who, on the one hand, value human rights, but on the other hand, wish to try and find a way in a small island to have some kind of protectionist system operating. And I make no apologies for calling it a protectionist system, because I think that's inherently what it will be. So again, this might throw up more questions than answers, but I think we have heard the point that it could be much worse. We could have a depopulation issue, a depopulation problem. And if and when that does happen, that will probably be largely due to factors outside of our control. And so we do have to make those tough choices about where we put the population. And I just bring it back to the fact, if you're one of those members who thinks we need to go gung-ho and build lots more new housing, then don't come crying to me if you realise that the population's gone up, because we've got much more capacity in terms of housing, and therefore we have a lot more people living in Jersey. I'll leave it there, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. It's a difficult debate to keep it all together without repeating some of the points that have been made, but it does seem that we are achieving some common ground this afternoon, which is a good thing. And so perhaps it is useful that we consider similar themes together, and hopefully the Deputy of St Peter will manage to draw out of those similar and common themes that we share some helpful points for him when he draws up his proposition. Like Deputy Martin, I do not think it's wise to focus on a number. I think a number is divisive, and it also does not focus on actually what we need as a community, because population is about skills, it's about raising revenue, it's about serving each other, it's about being a community and a space for us all to live. So I think actually the potential for depopulation, and others have mentioned this too, that concerns me more at the moment. We see the cost of living driving people away and causing people not to return when they've been away either for work or education. It is a real worry, and as more and more people choose to leave because of their inability to access affordable housing, that I can see a considerable problem coming down the track unless something is done to stop that tide, because we will not be able to fulfill our fundamental services such as education and health, and therefore we will see a breakdown of society. In order to maintain that population and help everybody to enjoy a good quality of life here, it is my view that we need to focus on wages, particularly the living wage, but also to have some acceptance within the community that automation has to be a part of life. Greater automation is the only way that we can help to maintain skill base. I think there have been examples, perhaps in the hospitality industry, of a group of restaurants who have chosen to automate certain functions within their operation so that it reduces the need for people, and they've been able to balance that out by offering all of their staff the living wage. I think that is an exemplary way to approach the issue, and we ought to be encouraging other parts of that sector and other sectors to follow suit. We are all aware that the agriculture industry, who have also invested in equipment to further mechanise their operations, and it would have been nice to see perhaps some fiscal stimulus solutions coming forward that would assist them and other sectors to further pursue mechanisation and automation to help us resolve this problem. So what fundamentally needs to be maintained in any proposal that touches on this subject is that people are treated with respect and not treated as mere commodities. And I really hope that we will see a policy come forward that will focus on valuing people, connecting our community, and ensuring that everybody is embraced for whatever it is that they contribute to ensure that our society works well, and we all support each other, because we all need each other to fulfill our various roles within the community. So we've talked, Sir, about the number, and I do feel that it's much more complicated than that. In terms of themes, many have also touched on the theme of skills and education. We absolutely need to focus on that. Perhaps one of the issues that we consistently see is the difficulty with which young people here find funding for postgraduate qualifications. We only, as an island, offer support for people in very limited number of postgraduate studies, and as an island that predominantly has an industry that focuses on high level of professional skill, it is my view that that is rather short-sighted, and we need to encourage a strengthening and a broadening of skills. I know that Deputy Masson is very passionate about that, and I hope that he will consider further achieving it. So in other themes, of course, are always the balance between the environment and access to housing, and the impact that people have on the environment and the consequent impact that that has on the quality of life. So rather than a citizens panel, which I think Deputy Young suggested, I would like to see this assembly work together to help to deliver balance, to focus on sustainability, and also to focus on values, because I think essentially that's what people who elect us to represent them wish to see us do and achieve. If we do work together, perhaps by forming subgroups and genuinely being inclusive and listening and cooperating together, then I think, especially as we have seen so many common themes appearing this afternoon, we will be able to achieve a sound policy that we will be proud of, and it will help to deliver a future for Jersey that is sound and ensures that we all enjoy a good quality of life for years to come. For the moment, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Senator. Conor Thompson-Wong.
Thank you, sir. I wasn't sure whether you read to call Senator Farnwick, but anyway, no worries.
The way I'm operating is that I'm calling second speeches after people have had the opportunity to make their first speech.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I felt sure I'd heard you say that. So it's difficult to know where to start this debate. I mean, as somebody who came to the island in 1966 and who married a local girl, I've seen the island grow in front over the years that I've been here, and frankly, you know, we have why do anything? Because frankly, we have a problem, and it's people like me who are still here, who have retired now, who represent quite a lot of the problem that we have. If I hadn't been elected to the Assembly, I would be a non-productive unit in society, and essentially taking up a house, but without contributing to the economy. And sadly, Jersey has a bulge of people like that. We have a bulge in the civil service who will be coming up for retirement, quite a large number of people. And in the finance industry, I can't speak for other industries because I haven't worked in other industries, but in the finance industry we have the same problem. And the people that, like me, who retire have to be replaced. And as an island, we haven't done particularly well in home-growing people to fill those gaps. And if I look at my own two children, my daughter I know has stayed in the island and gone into education and is now teaching at St George's, but my son now works in England. So 50% of our family have not helped, and I'm sure the story is the same elsewhere. So as an island, I think we have to sort of make some decisions, and we have to look at the industries we have, and we have to decide going forward how we're going to support those industries, because they will need people going forward, and those people have got to come from somewhere. And I don't see there are people coming through the schools who will fill some of those slots, but I don't see them filling all of those slots. Which brings me to the second issue, really. The island has a chronic shortage of housing for whatever reason, and we know that, because we see the effect of it. House prices have gone up ridiculously since I've been in the island. I mean, I bought my house for a 5-figure sum, and it's now worth a very large 6-figure sum, which is ridiculous. The house price inflation in Jersey is gone through the roof. And how anyone, when my daughter bought a house, I had to help her do it, because it would have been a struggle for her otherwise. And there are lots of people in the same position. And whilst we live on a lovely island, people with young families need to be housed, and if we can't house them, they will probably go elsewhere. So again, I think the housing issue we have to address, and sadly, I think it means that if we wish to continue on the current course, which is to have a successful finance industry and have successful other industries, and indeed have the support industries that support those industries, they demand people, and people demand houses. So unless we're going to radically cut back on those industries, or we're going to say we're only going to select a few and let them carry on, we have to make some decisions about what we do about housing. And sadly, those decisions may be painful. Certainly for those people who don't want to be building green areas, they're going to be painful. Because we've done very well filling in housing in St Helier and elsewhere, but that's going to run out. It's not going to last forever. There are not going to be an endless supply of places within town that can provide housing. Indeed, the infrastructure of St Helier is not going to last. It's not going to carry on supporting additional people forever. And it's not fair to put that strain on St Helier, because the more people we put into town, the less desirable a place it becomes to live. So again, I think we've got some tough choices to make as far as housing is concerned. And the final thing I'll throw into the ring is this brings us back to the population problem that we have. People who retire don't contribute, but they do need. They are the very people who need supporting. As those of us who are getting past retirement age quickly realise, and we see our parents needing the same thing, they're going to need care. They're going to need the facilities of the new hospital. They're going to need care home support in due course, and that demands people again. So I think I don't have any answers to the housing solution. What I know is that there's a problem, and that's why we need to do something. And I hope that all I've done is list the problems, and I don't like doing that. I like to be able to list solutions, but I don't particularly see a solution that springs out immediately. I see a lot of tough choices in terms of which industries we want to be successful and whether they contribute enough to the island for us to want that. I see a lot of tough choices about housing, and indeed some painful ones, because if we are going to provide sufficient housing and it's going to be of sufficient quality to retain people, then I suspect we're going to have to look at using up some of our green areas, and that will meet serious resistance from a lot of people. But at the end of the day, if we're going to carry on having a viable society, we might actually just have to do that. So I will listen to the rest of the debate with great interest, but I think we all know that we have to do something, because we can see the demands placed on infrastructure for ourselves, the increased levels of traffic, increased queues for things, increased time to get healthcare in the island, strains on our schools. We have a problem, and frankly, it's absolutely right that we have this debate, because frankly, if we don't address it soon, we will start to see the fallout of it. And any society that doesn't address problems like this, it's like business. There's only two ways to go. You go forward, and Jersey's been very good at going forward, It's been very good about dodging around inconvenient issues such as population. But sooner or later, the consequences of us not making decisions will come home to bite us. And we could well be facing a reverse problem in that because we don't have a viable population strategy which supports the community, we could find that the industries who provide us with our wealth will look at us and go, well, actually, we can do better elsewhere, and it's a better place for us to employ people. And so we'll move there and we'll take our business away from Jersey, which would be regrettable to say the least. So I think we are getting to a turning point where hard decisions have to be made. And I think it's absolutely vital that we have this debate. And I shall be listening very carefully and hopefully later on contributing with some thoughts of my own on how we can solve this problem. But I will leave it there and let my esteemed senatorial colleagues speak now.
Senator Farnham.
Thank you, sir. Just a quick one. Some members have talked about population cap. Well, I'm not sure some members. I think Deputy Truscott did, my good friend, and that sort of concerns me slightly. You know, the dripping tap, eventually the bath will be full, and then if we work, we cannot population in my opinion, sir. Sorry, I've got an echo coming through. I'm not sure if
we can hear you perfectly well, Senator.
Okay, right. Okay, I shall carry on. And we can't cap our population because that will lead to depopulation. As soon as a population stops growing, it starts shrinking, and that brings us a whole new load of problems. We're fortunate because, unlike some other countries, much larger countries, so we don't have have to deal with pro-natalist or anti-natalist issues. Really, the main levers of controlling our population are our migration controls. And perhaps with hindsight, we could have done that differently, but we can certainly learn from it. And I think that the new migration controls, although slightly more difficult, I think, to manage, primarily, or ironically, if that's a word, possibly because of Brexit and the pandemic, but I'll come on to that in a minute. We can learn from that. So really, our population numbers have always been, and I think will always be to some extent, driven by the levers we use for migration control. And people will need to come and go. And Senator Moore rightly pointed out that we see some people go because they can't realize their personal aspirations here, because they can't get jobs that will facilitate the purchase of a family home, and so they move off. But equally, we have others that come and decide to stay, and we always need that ebb and flow just to keep the potential growth under control a little bit. When we look at migration controls, I mean, I'm not sure actually whether if we hadn't introduced them from next year, as is the plan, whether I think we would have seen a slowing down in population number because of the Brexit position. Our access to the EU for workforce has pretty much has gone. Well, not gone, sir, but a completely different process is required, which of course is a disincentive for people wanting to come and work outside of the EU and for potential employers on Ireland. And the pandemic, sir, has forced us to embrace technology in a way we would never have before believed. Well, I'm not sure many of us would have ever envisaged we'd be quite comfortably and effectively holding States Assembly meetings like this. And I think that that these opportunities need to be grasped. Not that I don't miss being with my colleagues in the flesh there, but I think this sort of technology, as a result of which the businesses and the industries behind the technology have really been forced to ramp up their research and development, and I think we can all benefit from it. So I think those things alone will help us. Will put less pressure on population growth. But to finish, I think the real challenge is not necessarily the growth of the population or the overall numbers, but actually what the population is doing. And that's why we need to make sure that our vision, our vision for the community, for the economy, for the society, for our society stays strong. So because with a strong economy and an active and evolving society, so is the important thing. And I think that's what Jersey's always been good at, but that's where we must focus moving forward. Thank you.
Very much. Next to speak, Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. And there is just so much to say on this subject, sir, that it is very difficult to know where to start. But I will start with actually some of the comments that preceded me from Councillor St One and Senator Farnham. And I find it interesting because they both touched on what I think is the simple logic of the population growth conundrum. And that is, as long as there is population growth, the only possible outcome of that at some point in the future, and it could be centuries in the future, it's not tomorrow, we know that much, but the only possible outcome of continued population growth, even if it's growth of 100 people a year, is at some point there will be no green space left in this island. At some point there will be no woods left, there will be no fields left, there will be housing up to the beaches everywhere, because population growth, if you don't slow it down and ultimately bring it to a net zero population growth position at some point in the future, as Councillor St One said, you have to house these people who come into this island, and so the logic of population growth is ultimately complete urbanisation of the island of Jersey. And certainly as we stand here today, I think most States members and most members of our community in Jersey would say that that's not something we want to see. What we're not capable of doing very well at the moment is saying, where should the population get to? I don't know whether it should remain where we are today, whether it should be, or maybe a limit of 150,000, maybe a limit of 200,000, maybe the limit's 500,000 people. I don't know. That is the political question that different generations of politicians will decide as time goes by. But from my perspective, if you accept the logic, and I think it's undeniable logic, that population growth of any amount leads ultimately to the total urbanisation of Jersey, then you have to also accept that if you don't want the total urbanisation of Jersey, there has to be a point in the future where you have to say, look, we need net zero population growth. And I also find it interesting listening to Senator Farnham and the Councillor St One and others, is this, and I will refer to it as I believe it's really, in my mind, 20th century thinking, that you need people constantly to be growing your economy. I don't accept that that's correct. I accept that that's 20th century thinking, that that's the way things used to be. We are in transition period now, in my view, whereby through various tools, we can improve productivity in businesses, we can grow economies without using more and more people all the time. On top of that, I'd even suggest it's possible to move to a different economic paradigm, where actually you're looking to create prosperity and happiness for people. You're not looking to create constant economic growth for people. I believe reaching that point is probably a bit further down the line as well, but ultimately it's where we would need to be in people's mindsets, that they're not just constantly trying to attract more and more capital for themselves as individuals or for their families, that they are content with an ongoing level of quality of living, which, if you are to want at some point net zero population growth, is possibly something that you have to come to accept as well. So those are the kind of very, very high level framings of this debate from my perspective. The total urbanisation of Jersey, if you continue with population growth of any rate whatsoever. And also around that is this idea that you don't necessarily need a constant influx of people in order to maintain population growth. But within that framing, you then have to look at Jersey's economy and public finances and the whole structure of our kind of society as it stands at the moment. And it's very much structured on constant population growth. Our tax system is based heavily on personal taxation. So as we know, we have a demographic which is moving towards more people retired, no longer creating the economic outputs that they used to create. So in order to make up for that loss of the larger working population as they move towards retirement, at the moment, from a public finance perspective, we need more younger people coming in order to maintain those public finances, in order to maintain that tax base. So if you want to move to a net zero population growth at some point in the future, you absolutely need to also move away from a basis of taxation, which is personal taxation, as our mainstay of taxation in the island. That's a huge question. That's something which isn't going to be decided overnight. That's something that's going to come about from conversations, from understanding our economy better. If it involves, let's say, corporate taxation as an example, and only as an example, then you would need to understand how it's going to affect businesses, Jersey's attractiveness as a place for investment, and so on. Aside from that, we also have the state pension, which, and I apologise for the kind of, it's not vulgar language, but the simplistic language, which is our state pension system is quite simply a Ponzi scheme. Everyone knows this. There's not an islander I speak to who doesn't agree with that. The state pension is paying out from today's retired people from the wages earned by today's working people. And if you're going to have, so that means that as our retired population grows, which it is absolutely doing, you need more and more workers coming into the island in order to pay those pensions out the other side. You cannot, within that system, have a net zero population growth policy, because you constantly need to be having more workers coming in to pay for those pensions. So again, if you want to move to a point where you've got net zero population growth at some point in the future, you're going to have to completely restructure the pension system. It'll have to be funded in a very different way altogether. So those are just two of the financial aspects of our society today, which hinder us, don't just hinder us, they actively stop us from reducing population growth. And they certainly actively stop us from moving to a net zero population growth position. So without going into, I've heard people talking about housing, obviously talking about work, but without repeating what's already been said, it is my view, sir, that whilst the States Assembly has said that it wants to see a full population policy by the end of this year, it is completely impossible for the government to bring by the end of this year a full working population policy which reduces population growth or moves to a net zero population growth situation. Because the problems it would have to solve between now and the end of the year would involve the complete overhaul of the taxation system and the complete overhaul of the pension system, complete re-looking at population housing, and so on and so forth. So in my mind, this population policy that we have to bring forward by the end of the year should very much be focused on putting the foundation stones in place to enable us in the future to move to a net zero population growth position. Because at some point in the future, you're going to have to move to that position. Now, that point in the future could be 150 years' time. There might be a population of 300,000 on this island. And it's at that point that the politicians of the day decide, we need to move to the net zero population growth. but they would have the building blocks in place to allow that to happen and to enable that to happen. And so, sir, for me, this population policy that we need to bring out has got to be focused on those building blocks, on looking at the issues which stop us today from actively reducing population growth or moving to a net zero population growth position. That's where we need to start. There is no sense, in fact, it would be impossible and it would be a fool's errand if the population policy at the end of the year were to say we're going to cap population at 120,000 in 10 years time, because we would have none of the tools in place to make that happen and to allow it to happen in a sustainable way. So, sir, I'm going to leave it there for the moment. I'm just going to say, because I think credit where credit is due, is, and I'd always try to live by that maxim, is that when I joined the Assembly, I didn't think of net zero population growth as being a realistic position to take, for many of the reasons that Senator Farman just explained. But it was through conversations with Deputy Pershar that I have revised that position. And part of it is understanding the logic of population growth leads to the complete urbanisation of the island. And it's also that sense that it is only by laying down and putting the aspiration of net zero population growth in place that you will then get in the private sector, businesses and enterprises really fundamentally looking at the way they work and fundamentally looking at their productivity schemes and projects and really implementing that to allow that to happen. So, sir, there is a transition to take place. Personally, I'm at the perspective that we need to look at and prepare for net zero population growth. I think it's unlikely that I will be probably even alive when that policy, that net zero population growth is realised. But by working towards it and by putting that as the ultimate goal for some decades in the future, then we will, in the meantime, be creating a sustainable system which allows that to happen. I hope that makes sense, sir. But that's where I'll leave it, and I hope that's of some use to Deputy Hewlin and his policy board. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy Stumwalt.
Thank you, sir, and I'm pleased to follow the previous speaker because I would like to address this issue of net zero population growth, which I think is a chimera, really, and a quest that is thought after as the panacea for our island. But really, I think we need not be terrified by population growth. And I think we must understand that fears around the population growth can arise as the result of our perspective. We get used to an environment, we get used to the island we have experienced. We create a view in ourselves of the Jersey with which we are comfortable. And we don't have a wider perspective. And I think we need to. When the French Huguenots came to the island, they were considered by islanders as unwelcome outsiders in many cases. And now they are valued Jersey families. When English settlers arrived after steamboat travel to the island became a regular, reliable service, but there was hostility from the Jersey people at the time. But their ideas, their vibrancy, their industry and commerce created the island which we have built upon. They integrated and they fashioned our present culture. My father, now in his 90s, remembers Lake Henvey as open fields. And now I drive through Lake Henvey. I don't wistfully wish it to be restored to open fields. It's a part of my Jersey. So all the immigrations that the island has seen, they could be thought by Jerseymen of the time to have had the potential to spoil the island. But we need to look
with perspective. They haven't spoilt the island, and incoming population need not spoil the island, because all population influx, all people arriving will contribute to the island and become part of what the island is now and will be. So we shouldn't say that those population rises over recent years should not have happened, that we'd be better off back. What, some people choose numbers of 100,000, some people would like to go back to the 1960s. No, the island has adapted, and I would like us to remain adaptable over the long term, not shut down the island. So the previous speaker wondered aloud about the time when Jersey would become completely urbanized. But that's a view from our present perspective, what urbanization would look like. I mean, a Jerseyman 200-300 years ago would never have dreamt of the urbanization of the area between St Helier and St Oban. There was not even a road between St Helier and St Oban. Now we think nothing of it. We don't find that at all appalling and a backward step. But it would have been for somebody looking at it 200 or 300 years ago. So urbanization, no, that's just a perspective that we're applying at this time. So I don't think we should be saying we cannot sustain a population. If we do, it leads to depopulation, which others have spoken about. It leads to harms. It leads to the consequences that we see in many other islands offshore of a mainland area, where they are suffering in terms of young people leaving, lack of education and industry, and all the other harms. But maintaining a population, allowing proper growth, does mean that we must acknowledge we've got to be active and responsive in the management of our services for a growing population. It means that government will be harder than governments of a territory, say, where there's huge amounts of space and where there's extensive resources. It means we also have to be alert to particular pressures that arise in a community where people live close together, such as housing, and we've spoken a lot about housing today. And any government in Jersey will need to make bold decisions and be prepared to house its population whenever they arrive and wherever they've arrived from. In the same way that decisions were taken to subsidise houses with the States Loans housing scheme of the past. And we must recognise that with a limited supply of housing, we've got to accept who gets the poor end of the deal. It's often those who've most recently arrived in the community, those who are doing the hard graft, the jobs that other people don't want to do, and they are giving their utmost to keep the island thriving and vibrant. They should not be treated as an underclass, as less deserving of the benefits of island life than others who have been here for generations. And once we move to a migration policy which individualizes permits and recognizes those who apply to come here, and we ask them to come for whether it's 9 months, 4 years, permanently, we recognize their value and we give them proper treatment and proper housing. We can do that because we will have accepted that they should be here, we want them here, and they have a role to play. And that will allow the population of the island to operate in a cohesive way where we can all count as members of the community, whether we're income producing or not, and whatever age and whatever background. But that does mean that government has to be proactive and interventionist and manage these situations for the good of all that are here. So, sir, I think that we can manage, we can be pleased to accept people into this island and to contribute, but we must be prepared to adopt measures that in other places might be seen as overbearing, but we must be in a position to manage the population and to create a quality of life in this island that all can enjoy. Thank you, sir. I'm grateful.
Very much, Deputy Swan. Connetable of St Mary.
Thank you, sir. Just an observation. We are in a situation when in 10 years' time, the old people who are retired and according to many are reaping the benefits of our social security pension scheme. In 10 years' time, it is unfortunate that a lot of them will be dead or close to it. We will need younger people to replace them. They may not be able to be replaced from in this island. Therefore, in order to continue the way of life that people are used to, they will need to be replaced with people from elsewhere. So putting a number on population will not work. We need people here with the skills to keep our island economically viable. We need people here and have an open policy, but controlled with work permits. This will allow us to control the overall number. It has become a matter of financial survival, and this seems to be the only way that we can get out of it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy Pampton.
Thank you, sir. I was intending to speak twice, and I wanted to listen to colleagues' thoughts and views, and it's as ever what we are finding with yet another in-committee debate. It's opening and helping all of us, I think, as I think Senator Moore said, find some common ground. I just wanted to comment at this point on hearing certain things that have prompted me to speak earlier. One of the things that is something I constantly say at the moment is that the pandemic has exposed a lot of things around the world and in communities, and particularly in our community, in our island. And it's exposed a lot of good things, a lot of things that I think we always knew and maybe we could argue we take for granted. That's our community, the way we look out for each other, the way we learn from each other, the way we look back and see how far we've progressed as a community, and how we respect that the world around us has changed. And sometimes this island has punched above its weight, and sometimes it's made some excellent forward-thinking, progressive decision-making, as we saw yesterday. Deputy Dublay's amendment we saw yesterday. And then in other areas, it sees where we've still got a road to go. And the other thing, of course, about in a pandemic, in a crisis, as well as it shows up all the good things that we value and hold dear, it obviously exposes the things that we still need to get to grips with for us to go forward and do the things that I think we're all touching upon today. One of the things that has come through over the last year, and I know the Deputy St Peter will be foot stamping as he sits left of me usually in the chamber, is data and the understanding of the reality that outside of our world, and I mean that in a personal sense and a political sense, is as all of the many islands that we represent in our constituents, in our parishes, and further afield. One thing I was very concerned about during the pandemic was the effects that this would have on people who were already struggling and working really hard to keep their heads above the parapet, above the water. And as we're seeing, our lack of detail about what is the reality of the poverty and relative poverty that everyday folk are going through on this island. And that's why I was really pleased to bring my amendment to last year's government plan, and which obviously I was in discussion with the government and I accepted their amendment to my amendment. But that is so crucial in understanding just really where we need to get to grip with things to help the people that we represent on this island, because we need to understand. We can't just keep pushing things away and dealing with it later in the day. This is really, really essential. It was the same thing this year that the coinciding of the census and the island plan. For me, what I could never get my head around is the census is a really good still, always room for improvement way for us to understanding and getting data of where we are now. And the order of how we go about things sometimes doesn't make sense. Surely to do the census and get the data that we need will then inform the island plan as we go forward. The same I would say in terms of the work that's going on with the assisted dying conversation that we as an island will continue to have. The citizens jury that's put in place is bringing together people to talk and look at a very sensitive subject that will affect a lot of people, and we at some stage will have to have a vote on. But what's really crucial is everybody has the right to be heard, and we take our time to get the right decision for our island. That's what always has to be our focus. And that's what I want to see come through with today's in-committee debate. We're hearing that, we're listening to each other. That's positive. And we need to see that, as Deputy Morell said earlier, with what is coming down the line. The other thing is the tone of the way that this is presented. And sometimes I think when we get into this area, we can sometimes be lost in the myriad of what's going on in the world right now. There is a lot of tensions, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of, I don't know, opposing views on these things. And I don't want us to be caught up in that. We have to be real to, as the Deputy Sawant said, well, of our perspective. It's so important. And I just hope that's the tone, because we've got to get this right. We have to get this right, but have to include everybody. And we can't shut our ears off, because the communication transparency of this is so important. So that's what I wanted to say at this stage. I look forward to hearing the rest of the debate and my other thoughts on what could possibly be as constructive as that process later. But I just wanted to say that now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any member wish to speak next on the opposition? Deputy of St. Peter.
So really, just to understand something now, many people have mentioned that they would like to speak twice, and I think it's been fascinating so far hearing everybody's views of where we are today and their vision for the future. But people, I think, are going to come back and want to say their solutions for this and how they're going to manage these tensions. So will you be breaking the debate into two halves, or if people stop speaking now, will you say that's the end of the debate?
Well, we haven't formally fixed, although you've made the suggestion in R41, that we have not formally fixed. The debate is separated into part 1 and part 2, but I am content that if what I will do is I will ask if anyone wishes to speak in part 1 of the debate, and if the answer to that is no, then I will ask if anyone wishes to speak in part 2 of the debate. If the answer to that is no, well, then the debate is finished. If the answer to that is yes, somebody indicates desire to speak, the debate will continue. If that's it.
Thank you, sir. And I apologise to anybody if I was a bit quick off the button trying to ask that question. I just didn't want the debate to end prematurely. So thank you, sir.
Indeed. So if members have a contribution they wish to make under part 1 of the report, so the opportunity to describe their vision for Jersey over the next 5, 10, 20 years, and how a common population policy would help to achieve that aim, then if anyone would wish to speak to that, would they indicate now? Otherwise, we'll move on to part 2 of that debate. Very well. Deputy St Martin.
Thank you, sir. And I'll just a few words before we move on. I am a bit concerned about some members' views on the stabilisation or maintenance of population and not increasing. I fully understand the concept of complete and total urbanisation of the island, but I think for me that's scaremongering a bit. And I say to those members that want to maintain a stable population that people have babies, they have children, the island grows its population naturally. We need to think very, very carefully before we do something quite, in my view, as draconian as that. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak on part 1 of the debate? Deputy St Peter, I wasn't proposing to call on you to summarise part 1, I was proposing to move straight to part 2.
Thank you.
Deputy Young, you wish to speak on part 1?
Just in very, very summary, sir, I think what the vision has to be is to end up with a sustainable island, which means that we have a balance that people can live with between the economy and our environment and our community needs. And we have allowed that seriously to get out of balance, and we need to bring it back. I agree that, you know, trying to put numbers is not the way, but I think all those 3 ingredients have to be there. And I think that means about having an equality, much greater degree of equality in our systems of how we pay for government, because otherwise we would just encourage more and more growth of just purely to people coming into the island. We've got to live within our means more and use our resources that we have and people that we have and the wonderful skills and the talent we've got here. We've got to do it better. And so I think that is a real big tough challenge, and it is something that I do share the doubts of Deputy Morell, or whether it's realistically to solve all that inside the very short timetable sought. But I think those are definitely there. And of course, the needs of the community are about being much more confident, that certainly I am now, that we can really have social care in the community, so that we can all meet people's needs in the future, and our education service. Those are the keys. So those are the key elements. It's a huge challenge, but please, there's one overall lesson. You get what you pay for. We are going to have to pay for this, and there is going to be a cost, and the people are prepared, need to be prepared to be open to changing our tax system. Thank you.
Right. Does anyone else wish to speak on the first part of the debate? If no other member wishes to speak on the first part of the debate, then I close that part of the debate. Does any member wish to speak on the second part of the debate? No member wishes to speak on the second part of the debate, and if I were to close the debate, that would signify the entire conclusion. Thank you very much. Senator Valwa.
Yes, thank you, sir. I was hesitant to speak on the first part of the debate. Many members iterated much of what I saw in terms of the skills and the need for the skills on the island. My concerns come in terms of defining sustainability. This kind of goes on to part 2, where we're talking about reflecting on the different visions and that were set out in the first part of this debate. And I think for me, I've always had an issue with what that sustainability predominantly means for the island. Anything could technically be sustainable if you're willing to pay for it and you're willing to take on some of the issues that come with that. So I think it's very much about life-work balance situation. And I think one of the things that are missing, particularly in the timetable that's been referred to in the very helpful report, and I thank the Deputy St Peters and the Chief Minister for lodging the report to assist with this debate. But the timetable, there's no mention of bringing in children and young people's voices into this and what their next 20 years looks like and means to them. There are very mixed messages that are displayed, not just by us as politicians, but by the population as a whole to our younger generation. You have to go off island in order to get the experience to work in high-level jobs to afford to live, and therefore you're more likely to get a decent job in Jersey. Or actually you need to stay in Jersey and you need to do vocational skills because actually that will be good for you. Very, very mixed messages. We are an island at the end of the day, and I think that's going to be one of the pivotal issues that we're going to have to address in terms of how we identify the right policies and the right frameworks. And I think one of the very good starting points is the feedback that we've had either through the framework that was the performance framework that's been developed, which is the voice of the population, which was brought out in 2018. We also have, and I think this talks to in particular the conversation that's just been had around skills and education in the island. Members will know I'm very passionate particularly about that area, and I think we do it a disservice, and I don't think we invest in it enough to meet the population issues that we face and the skills issues that we're going to face. And I want to mention in particularly here is the big education conversation and the fight for the funding that was needed for this. And that doesn't even go far enough, sir, because we have to recognise we're a neurodiverse society. We are a diverse society, but we think very differently and we have different ways at coming from areas. And I think there is potentially a rub up against what is growth for the island in order for it to survive as an economy versus what is the growth of the island for us to have the right work-life balance so that we can enjoy our family, our friends, our environment in the right proportionate way against that which we're required to have in terms of an income, to have a house over our head, to have food in our bellies, and to be part of society and a community that support each other. And I think many of the policies that are referred to, particularly in the second part, which will support the vision of the population policy that ultimately comes out of this, there's going to be some extremely difficult decisions that will have to be made. And I think somebody mentioned it earlier about having the tap turned on and off. And I think that's very much going to be the case, but this is going to have to be a long-term consideration in order to have that tap turning on and off and the right data to inform that tap, which is why I'm appreciative of the Migration Board producing their report and doing that work. But I'd like to make sure that children and young people have a voice in this timetable to feed back, because in 20 years' time they'll be inheriting something that we will ultimately be determining for them, and it'd be useful to have their feedback on this as well. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Sandra. Does any other member wish to speak? Remind members, if I close the debate, then the debate is over for all purposes. Does any other member wish to speak? No other member wishes to speak? Deputy St Mary.
Yes, thank you, sir. First of all, can I just endorse the comments made by the Deputy St Martin in the first part of the debate as to population growth generally. Some 18 months ago, I was in the Isle of Man at a a meeting for the Crown dependencies, and as is my wont, I picked up the local paper, and there were two familiar headlines on it. One related to a planning application which a lot of the locals didn't want, and the other was the population problem. But the population in the Isle of Man is that they haven't enough. It's one shared by Guernsey, and we are the only Crown dependency where, if it is a problem, we have it, and we must carefully balance whatever regulations we introduce to make sure that we don't pick up a similar baton that we did some years ago with the finance industry, when the word went round that Jersey was closed to business when it wasn't. We must be very careful as to maintaining our balance there. And as to the mechanisms by which we can achieve that, or the problems that overpopulation gives rise to, I think those who prepared this particular paper, two things come to mind. The first is, at the time of the last election, members may recall that I think it was the Construction Council invited prospective members to a conference as to where they were going and how they saw their needs. And one of the warnings they gave was the overheating, if you like, but the excessive demand on their members. And to a large extent, I suggest that the states have a part to play in this. The states should be able to monitor the number of people required on states projects, but we appear to produce them one after another without any thought to the number of people we will be obliged to bring into the island to carry out those projects, and there needs to be better management on that side. And I apologise to those involved if that's already in place, but I suggest perhaps not enough. And the other aspect, which is a relatively small one in the context of things, but again, I went to the Jersey Farming Conference, I think it was the year before last, where the Minister of the Environment quite rightly brought up the potential water shortage and introduced the possibility of water catchment tanks. And I would like to see that advance. I don't see why there shouldn't be legislation introduced whereby new properties have that facility. I lived in a property once with it there, and whereby incentives are given to existing properties to introduce them. They're just two small measures I suggest which might be thought through. Thanks, sir.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak in the debate? Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. And just very quickly on the ideas side of things, possibly some terrible ideas, but just a few I'd like to throw in there at a very practical level. One was that she came up in conversation with Deputy St. Peter during lockdown. So maybe it is a fevered lockdown idea, who knows? But from the perspective of productivity and trying to increase productivity within businesses, I had thought that it may be an idea to tie to some extent the application for a license for someone outside the island to come work in a business to the delivery of a productivity plan for that business. Thereby, businesses with no productivity plans and none in the offing would not be able to access workers from outside the island. And the idea being that if you really do need this person to work in your business, then you must have a productivity plan which will show us how you're going to decrease the need for people in your business over time. But one idea. Another idea just on the housing situation, sir, has come from a parishioner. And it's a parishioners, a couple who would like to retire and are in a house that is larger than they need. But at the moment, it doesn't make sense the way the housing market works for them to sell their house and downsize immediately. They wouldn't get very much for that. So they asked if there was any schemes within the government whereby, I know this happens in France, not at a government level, but whereby they could sell the house today with kind of 10 or 15 year or lifetime enjoyment of that house, with the government having bought that house, then able to put it into housing stock once they leave in 10 or 15 years time to go to somewhere smaller. the government would then have housing stock coming online. So it's a difficult one for a government to enter into, I think, but it's still an interesting idea, helping people downsize by giving them the funds they need to then go out and find somewhere else. I'd be happy to speak to other people in greater detail about that. But it's, again, tied to housing, is this idea that we need to use the land we have in Jersey and the already built up area to the best possible extent and use it as efficiently as possible. So I do feel, I was discussing this with another deputy earlier today, I do feel we need to take stock properly of the unused houses in Jersey, those which are standing there empty, and it would take some effort, but it is not enough for us just to assume that they're going to be put back into use sometime soon. We essentially need to create an inventory of unused houses in Jersey, understand the reasons why they're not used, and where those reasons aren't understandable, it could be waiting for an estate to be settled or something like this, but where they are just unused, perhaps for capital appreciation, then there needs to be a mechanism for the government to force them back into use for housing, because as such a small island, we just cannot accept, it makes no sense to accept that there are possibly, and I think by the last count, 3,000, Senator Mezek would know better than me, but I think it was, we believe there are 3,000 unused properties in Jersey, and that's just too many. That's 3,000 families who could be using those premises. So they're just, thank you, Senator Mezek, for confirming that. And so they're just three ideas, possibly completely off the wall and balmy ideas, but as this is the ideas section of the debate, I thought I'd throw them out there as things that are worth possibly mulling over. But I'll leave it at that, sir, and I hope someone else does decide to continue the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak in the debate? In case there's any confusion, this is the second part of the debate, and if no one wishes to speak, the debate will end. Does any member wish to speak in the debate? If no other member wishes to speak in the debate, Senator Mezek.
Senator
Mezek and then Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I'm getting a lot of interference.
Yes,
I can see a member.
Can someone make sure their machinery is switched off if it is unnecessarily on? That's probably all right now, Senator.
Great. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I just want to follow on from Deputy Morale, and since this is meant to be the ideas section of the debate, just to throw some things out here and try and connect them to what I said about mistakes we've made in the past that I spoke about in the first part of this debate. And we do, I think, have to accept that if we don't use our resources adequately, then that can put strain on whatever population policy we do adopt. And it is important that we make sure that we get the best use of what we have in the island to mitigate what we may or may not want to achieve with a population policy. And housing is quite clearly one of the most important aspects of that. If we're going to leave our housing system completely unaltered and ignore it when it comes to deciding population policy and potentially having more people moving into the island to live, then we can end up exacerbating things and have a negative impact on the standard of living. And so what Deputy Morell mentioned there about empty properties is really, really important. At the last census, which was now a decade and probably a few days ago now, is obviously out of date, and we'll find out the new figures for how many empty properties there are in the island. But at the last count, it was 3,000, and in that 3,000, I'm sure that a very, very good proportion of them were probably empty for perfectly reasonable reasons at the time. But even if you got just a proportion of those homes back on the market or back with families living in them, you would alleviate some of the strain being put in other parts of the market and a potential further need to develop more and end up having all sorts of horrible debates and arguments over which parts of the island they'll end up getting built in or which fields will have to lose, and all of those debates we prefer not to be having. So, you know, if we're going to be serious about dealing with that issue, then we're going to have to actually put things on the table. If you're serious, you're going to have to do this, and if you're not prepared to do this, don't pretend you're serious. So let's tax empty properties, and let's put some sort of financial penalty in place where if you are somebody who is hoarding properties that you are not capable of looking after or managing properly, that there is a very strong incentive for you to dispose of those properties and not continue to do that. If there are certain investors who are upset by that because they were hoarding properties to speculate on them and make a bigger profit, tough luck to them. We'll need the courage to send out those messages and say to some people who benefit very handsomely from the status quo, we're very sorry, but in the interests of the whole island and the macroeconomic picture we're trying to deliver here, certain decisions will have to be made that are not in your interests, and that will, when it comes to housing, largely be investors, because we have over many years turned what is an absolute basic need for people into something that's a commodity to make money out of. So since this is the idea section, let's tax empty properties in some form or another, provide that clear disincentive for hoarding properties or not using them properly, and hopefully end up with more families living in them, whether they're buying them when they come onto the market, or hopefully, if not that, at least renting it in some other way. We should also look properly at the recommendations that are going to be published at some point. The Chief Minister said by the end of the month. I'll believe that when I see it, but hopefully it's right. The recommendations that will come from the Housing Policy Development Board, which are going to propose bringing about a fairer and more balanced housing market that supports those who are never going to be the big players in the market as investors, but people who are simply looking after somewhere to live that will meet their needs and that they can afford. And that may well mean, in some instances, saying to those who deliver housing, sorry, but you can't do what you like here. You're going to have to do, you're going to have to incorporate into your development or whatever it is you're doing, something that we consider to be in the interest of the whole island. And that may mean saying to developers when they're building large amounts of properties that a significant proportion of them have got to be for first-time buyers or for sub-market rent in some form or another. And if they're not prepared to do that, then we don't give them planning permission. And if they hoard land that they don't seek to get planning permission on, then we put some sort of penalty on them for it to incentivize better use of our land. Some people might think that that's quite a radical thing to do, but I want to ask them if they are those who will criticize ideas like that for being too radical, is what's your proposal instead? Because if it's that we do nothing, then you're not being constructive and not being realistic about trying to tackle the problems that Jersey needs to, if we're to then go on and have a sustainable population policy in one form or another. So those are broadly, I think, two ideas just to contribute at this stage: taxing empty properties and requiring developers to provide a proportion of the homes that they develop for affordable housing in one form or another, and putting penalties in place for those who hoard land and don't seek to get planning permission when they should be, or get planning permission and then wait years and years and years before attempting to do anything out of it, so they can make maximum profit out of it when there are people who are desperate for homes to live in. So those are just some ideas at this point, and if anyone is shrieking in horror at those suggestions, I challenge them here and now to come up with something better.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I would speak after the last two or three speakers, and a lot of the things I was going to say were covered there. But it's interesting. There's a couple of things I would say, and I would ask, perhaps this is an idea that we can act very simply. Every time the word property is used, why don't we translate the word home into that? And I've said this before and I'll say it again, because when we talk about the homes market, if you want to call it that, we are talking about exactly that, somewhere for people, a basis for your life is the home that you live in. And unless you have the right and you have security in that home, life becomes very difficult. It is perhaps the most unnerving thing to be facing insecurity in your home, and that's something we need to address. And we need to address that in particular for young people on this island. Otherwise, we will have a talent drain from this island that will be very difficult to repair. It will be very difficult to build up again. And we need to address that for young people. And there's so many young people who have educated themselves so well in many different ways. And I'll talk a little about education in a second. But they are not on island at the moment. They are using their skills elsewhere. And one of the reasons is it is unaffordable for them to come back and live here and have any form of standard of living. And that has to be addressed. And that is an integral part of the population debate, so that any talent that we have remains here and it can be used to the best of its ability. I also would like to say that we need to end this false dichotomy between the academic and the vocational educational world. They are not a separation. Many skills, many occupations, many professions are a combination of the academic and the vocational, and medicine is a prime example of that. You need to know your academia, but you also know how to actually treat a human being, and that false dichotomy is reflected in our education system. And I would suggest we need to move further away from the Anglo-American nature of our education system and more towards a much worldwide view, which is more about educating the broader in the broader sense, and that will give us the type of individual skills and education that will serve our community very well. It will also increase our awareness of our place in the world. And whenever we talk about population, we have to be very careful that we do not just go move towards this insular view, because it is not a threat to have diversity in our community. It is a value, and it gives us all a greater understanding of where we are. I would like to see rent stabilisation. I would like to see that affordable houses rents are reduced, so that people are not giving up such a large amount of their income each month, even on supposable affordable accommodation, or being trapped in the cycle of needing income support, even though they are working full time, all the hours under the sun. And that cannot be sustainable in any sense. And that's sustainable in terms of economic terms and in terms of social existence. I wonder whether we need to look at the notion of a universal basic income, so that when people do want to retrain, they can do that. And therefore we look at the value of that person to our society, and as they retrain, realise that they'll actually give something back to our society in the long term. And this notion that you will not stay in one career throughout your lives, I think is very important. Most of us, and if not all of us, in this assembly have certainly changed careers significantly to take on this role, for example. I think it was Deputy Johnson who spoke about flexibility. It may have been someone else who spoke about flexibility earlier. Yes, you're right. This cannot simply be a numbers game. And I would urge that one of the actions taken is that a flexible approach is taken, and not just simplistic quotas, because they do not work. And finally, sir, I would say that this is more about than just numbers. This is about providing actions of the type that have been mentioned by the last couple of speakers, and actions on things like education that would enable us to have the sort of society we want to build, that enables us to have the flexibility needed to maintain that society and enables us to respond to future changes that we face. And one of those, it has to be said, and we need to not shy away from it, not ignore it, or not deny it, is the effects of climate change on the rest of the world, and particularly on small island communities. We have to take that into account when we look at all of our policies into the future. It will be perhaps the singly most damaging thing into the future that we will face. We have to not just mitigate, but act to make change and lead the world in that change if we can. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. And there have been some great speeches, and I just wanted to reinforce, without going into too much detail, what a couple of previous speakers have said. And I wanted to echo, first of all, what Senator Valois said about involving children in this process, and I heartily agree with that sentiment, because children actually have a lot more invested in this than us, because they're going to live the longest and they will be here feeling the effects. So I really want to reinforce that. There's been quite a lot of talk about growth, and I think Senator Mezek mentioned it first, and I think also Deputy Morell made some important points about why we always talking about striving for constant growth, and we should be measuring other things, and that has really resonated with me. And when I turn to the report, which is great, by the way, and I love all the data in there. That's I've really enjoyed looking at all the facts and figures in there. So I thank the deputy who presented that. But what did concern me actually is building on what Deputy Morell was saying about that we should be measuring happiness. And I want that to be something that's picked up by the Deputy of St. Peter when he looks back on this debate, because it can be done. Other jurisdictions do it, and that should be considered alongside some of the things that are mentioned at the end of the report. And whilst data is really important, I'm a little bit disappointed that there is only one paragraph on some of the qualitative factors. I'm pleased it's in there though, and just to refer to them, it says other factors are harder to measure but no less important, and it lists feelings of community, fairness and equality, the impact to people of the loss of open fields and green spaces, the impact upon the environment and ecology, and real and psychological concerns about the pressures on services such as schools, roads and hospitals. And I don't want those things to be an afterthought. I would actually like those things to move right to the top of the agenda when we're talking about population and about actually what people need and what people want, because the word population, that means it's people, isn't it? It's a group of people, and people are human beings. So that's what we need to go back to, is what do human beings need for a good life? And I could start quoting philosophy here, sir, but I just hope that will be taken on board, that we don't take too much of a numbers-based approach when we are creating these strategies. We need to actually consider the qualitative factors and bump them up the agenda a little bit. And I think we're getting more used to doing things like that. And some of the processes that we have in place, like a child rights impact assessment, I'm hoping that will be an absolute given, that children's rights will be considered right from the beginning. But I also think that there are other factors that need to be taken into account. And I've raised, I think it was the last sitting, I raised a concept around gender sensitive policy formation and gender mainstreaming, which is when we're forming policy, we should be thinking about when we have a policy under formation, how it will impact potentially in a different way on different genders. So that's something that needs to be taken into account as well. And in terms of the system that we're developing for child rights impact assessments, there are precedents in other jurisdictions. I think it might be Wales, somewhere in the UK, has something called a public sector equality duty. Now, we don't have that duty in law in Jersey, but I don't see why we shouldn't take that best practice and maybe apply it to this, which is possibly the most important policy area that we can work on as an assembly. So I'd like the Deputy St. Peter to consider that model of a public sector equality duty and applying that method to policy formation around a population policy. And I think that was just about all I had to say, sir. Actually, no, sorry, I have got one more point I wanted to make. I'm not sure if anybody has mentioned this already, but in terms of increased growth, and there was a model in this report. I'll see if I can find it and find what page it was on, which was I think trying to illustrate growth. And here we go. Example of relationship between government policy areas and sustainable population. And it has in there increased productivity as being something that's necessary for a sustainable population and sustainable development. Now, I just want to challenge that notion of increased productivity as being more people on an island doing more and more work, more. Productivity doesn't necessarily mean more people, and it doesn't necessarily mean more work in terms of volume of hours worked. We can increase productivity in innovative ways, and one of the ways that I think we should be looking at is changing the structure of our working week. And I've mentioned this before, and other members have as well, that we need to look at a 4-day working week for Jersey. And I'm not sure that's something that's going to come from the private sector. I think it needs to come from the public sector, because some of the evidence shows that moving to a 4-day working week at least maintains productivity, but sometimes increases productivity. And if we think about what islanders might do with that extra day, well, I think it would have a doubly positive impact, because that extra time will often be used for pursuits that have positive health impacts, which means we would save tax money on our health service, but also the extra time can and would probably be spent on care. And again, that's something that we don't measure in terms of the impact on our economy. So we don't know the contribution to our economy that people in caring roles, unpaid caring roles, make. So how can we fully assess how that interacts with our ageing population and the care that will be needed there and the money that will be needed to fund that care? So so there's a little bit of, we need more data, we need to measure things a bit better, but also I just think being a bit more innovative and looking at solutions like that. So those are just some things, a few ideas, some things that I would like to consider, and a few kind of ways of looking at things that I would like to be prioritised. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Next to speak is Senator Valwell.
Yes, thank you, sir. Just listening further to other members, just came into my head something I mentioned a while ago, I believe, and I believe it was the previous health minister. So I'm not sure whether it would be viable and what the viability of it would look like. But we have the benefits of the things like Commonwealth Parliamentary Associations, the British Irish Council, which has been mentioned in terms of data within the report that's been provided. And whether we've sought to partner with countries in fields such as education and health to share and develop our educators and our health professionals in particular with the experience, knowledge and improvements that are needed in the services going forward. And I say that because it's very much becoming specialised areas, and being an island, you don't have the opportunity to share that experience with other, as in the UK, local authorities, or as in the States, other states. So an opportunity there, and this is just an idea and something to throw out there for consideration when we're talking about population policies. Yes, something like a secondment, but again, taking into account, and I think it was Deputy Ward that was talking about, you know, a lot of our younger generations go away and they go to university and they work in specific skill sets. They may not come back because it's too expensive for them to live here. You know, there are a lot of generations that are deciding, well, do I buy a house or do I have a family? Can I afford both? Can't I afford both? That unfortunately comes from a younger generation, my generation and younger in the island, who have had that conversation with themselves. Plenty of my friends have raised this repeatedly over the years. And I wonder whether there's an opportunity here with regards to enabling some form of a secondment to give that opportunity for people to have a different experience of a skill set within a small island, which they may not have anywhere else, which may help with considering what our population policy may look like. And with regards to Deputy Dublay's very good speech, she refers to the well-being and whether people are happy. I mean, there is a Better Life Index. We now have this Jersey Performance Framework. I think we need to utilise that information and that data to give us that rich idea of what it is the quality the public are looking for our island and how that drives us moving forward. And that moves me on to, I mentioned before about the big education conversation and the work around schools. And one of the things that came out of that was the concern that there was a lack of choice at school, depending on what catchment you were in, depending on whether you went to a fee-paying school or not. The choice for children to determine, or young people to determine, their future prospects in the economy, whether they want to stay here or not, sir. And it's absolutely their right to be able to go and live somewhere else and not come back. And if they choose to come back, that is great. But the choice is really important for them to live that fulfilling and that well-being part of their lives, to feel a sense of achievement, and also the fact that they're giving back for what they've achieved over their time and their life, and that's really important. And I'm just thinking around Deputy Morell's ideas when he was talking about business and the skills and those areas, and I believe it was mentioned, I think it might have been the Economic Oversight Group, about some form of skills audit. Now, I know Skills Jersey do a lot of work around this, but there is a partnership between both the government and business around skills and training and upskilling. And so I'm not sure whether that skills audit has fully taken place or whether it will take place, but I think it's actually crucial to this conversation around our population policy and what that looks like and what that means. And I think there's also an opportunity, just another idea to throw out there, is the ability for generations to learn and adapt and be resilient from the older generations who have retired or moved on out of their professions, who will be able to pass on their skills in some way. And I have to say, from my experience of working in the States over 12 years, learning from many people of different age groups has been extremely beneficial in terms of upskilling my own thinking in the way that I work. And I think that's crucial to anything we want to learn, because sometimes there are just things that are useful, and I think there are resilience lessons that we can learn. If we're going to have whatever the population policy looks like, if we end up with a reduction of people coming into the island, and we know that from a variety of conversations around things like climate change and the effects on the environment, the larger the populations are, the more effect it will have on those areas. And so if we were to have a reduction in population. I think that it's really crucial us as a community are able to work well together and understand the importance of us all being different and learning from each other in a productive way to make the most for each other, but the island as a whole. So I think that's everything that I wanted to say. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
You're on mute, sir.
You're muted, sir.
I have to give my words of wisdom again then. I'm just wanted to inform members I'm operating a priority for first-time speakers, second priority to second-time speakers, and then third priority to third-time speakers, which is why, Deputy St Martin, it may appear you've dropped off the list, but you haven't. It's just there are other first and second-time speakers ahead of you. Very well. Colin Tarbus and Saviour.
Hang on, sir, I'm coming. Sorry, I wasn't ready. Yes, thank you very much, sir. A lot has been said about education, and we do have some very good schools here, and education has been a priority for a lot. And a lot of youngsters have gone away, read their education, and when they apply for a position that becomes vacant in the island, they are passed over for people from other jurisdictions. Now, a lot has also been said about housing. Housing is not the only problem, sir, because when the position that becomes vacant is given to someone from outside of the island, accommodation is found for them. Why can't we do that for locals who are applying for a job to return to their island, who has educated them, who has paid for a lot of their bits and pieces? And I just think it's a shame that locals are being passed over. We're bringing people from other jurisdictions to this island. We're taking great care of them. We're giving them all sorts. And yet we have locals who could actually do the jobs and fill the positions. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Colin Tarbus. Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. Just a few disjointed thoughts about what's been said. We have started not allowing sales of apartments to anybody but locals, which I think is a good step. I do wonder, has anyone done any? Oh, sorry. Oh, shut up. Sorry.
I'm sure there are frustrations. Are you able to switch your phone off?
I'm trying to stop the phone.
And shut up is not generally thought to be a parliamentary term, Senator, either. If there's any way you can switch off your phone.
I have done, sir.
Very much.
I just wonder if anyone's done any work on whether the schemes to convert hotels to apartments are converting them for step down by, sort of reducing size for older couples, or whether they're actually for immigrants. We've mentioned education. Well, I've been involved with this program to try and teach youngsters how to use computer coding, which has been scuppered by education officials, and we've lost 2 or 3 years. The local civil servants are dismissing useful ideas, and we need more imaginative careers staff too, instead of recommending females to go off and do primary school. I'm not decrying it, it's needed, but we need more imagination by our careers staff and productivity. Basically, we need to look at the systems we've got, not computer systems, but the way we work. We need to have, are we properly encouraging levels of management to communicate manager to frontline staff as well as horizontally amongst the staff. You know, we need to be a bit more imaginative about these things. I've been through, I don't know, 3 or 4 different sort of career streams, and it's a question of actually just adapting to this and using your imagination. And as I say, I have been really quite upset at the way we've lost time on the computer systems. We won't look properly at encouraging levels of management to communicate vertically as well as horizontally. You know, we need to start at home to do these sort of things, not just say we must get it from overseas. We've got some very good people and some very good stuff locally, and we need to just give them a chance to flourish. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy Martin.
Oh, thank you, sir. Yes, and I wouldn't disagree with anything Deputy Doublé or Deputy Senator Vora said about we must consult the young. Whatever we do or decide today will have much more effect on the under 30s than it will have the over 30s, and it will take some time to kick in. But I wanted to speak because as well, and we're supposed to come up with some solutions. It was a comment by the Constable of St One, who was basically said if he hadn't come into the Assembly, he'd been put out to pasture. I like to remind many, we do not have a retirement age. We have an age where you can get your pension, but we do have discrimination against age at the moment. And I'm not sure, sir, employers have got that quite right yet. I'm not sure they're utilising the wealth of the experience of older people who want to carry on working. I'm not forcing anybody. I think there must be much more flexibility in, you know, if you want to work an extra 5 years, but you want to do then 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, and at the same time you're training people coming in because you also have the experience. I think that would be a fantastic idea, and the law was only passed a few years ago, but people keep saying, oh, pension age, I've got to go. No, you haven't got to go. If you're capable of doing your job and you want to stay, please, you know, have that conversation with your employer. Lots been spoken about housing, and I know Andy and are doing a fantastic job, and other social providers and even private providers, but are we concentrating so much on the box, the house, not building the communities, especially for older people who might have had a marriage breakdown or lost their partner? We need to have a community much more involved, and that doesn't need to be all of one's design or one age either, because people flourish with different people around. Because we're Jersey, we have lots of people come here to work, marry, but their grandparents are in a different country. And we also have grandparents here, sir, whose older children have gone to live in a different country and they don't have children. But again, much wealth that could be passed on. Many years ago, and I think it was the Deputy of Trinity, Deputy Pryke and Deputy Hilton, when they were assistant housing and planning, they went off to see some fantastic things from the, I think, Roundtree, and I sent them to somewhere, the Metropolitan Housing Association, which had done something fantastic for the community. You wouldn't believe, in a 24-storey housing block, but they were thinking outside the box. It had about a 5-year waiting list then, because it was just so sought after. Communal areas, all different ages, people who wanted to live alone who would normally find it hard. I hope I'm giving a few solutions there, sir. Just we need to think a bit more agile, and if we want to start restricting population, we absolutely need to respect and you know, listen to every person in our population, whatever age, and if they have a skill, we need to be able to utilise that skill and let them work the hours they want. And you know, there is flexible working, but again, I go back to, please don't always look for someone to come in, and don't always think that you're past your sell-by date at a certain age, because certainly, absolutely not. And that's why we have age discrimination across the board. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Deputy St Martin.
Thank you, sir. And I just wanted to say that any population migration policies are going to have to be a mixture of input from all across the different sides of council and ministers, and especially so from the Minister for Environment, or in the old days, planning and environment. And planning is an interesting word, sir, because some people may consider the planning part of planning minister to be there because it's a department that deals with plans, but I've always thought about it as a department that looks forward to the future and plans where things will go and how things will happen. And that's a vital thing and a vital role in this population debate, because housing, as we know, is going to be part of that debate, and where we build houses is very much part of that. So the Minister for Planning is a vital and key role. I was prompted to speak by Senator Mezek, and while I don't necessarily share his ideas 100%, he does have a good point in some areas, and that's around the ability of some people to gain approvals for planning applications and just sit on them. When I became Minister for Planning back in 2014, I was amazed to find that we had on the books at that time over 1,000 units of accommodation which had been approved but were not being built out. And in order to try to ease that, I reduced the time from 5 years to 3 years, at which point approvals had to be renewed, because I was trying to, at that time, do a better job of planning for the future. There is no point in granting approvals for people to do any sorts of things if they have no intention of building them out, because we give ourselves a false impression. We allow us to think that we're providing them for the future, providing homes, providing accommodation, providing whatever. But of course, we only come to provide those units if they are actually built. I had one person came to see me while I was Minister saying he was very unhappy with an approval that he'd been given for social and affordable housing, and he wanted open market housing, and he said he would just refuse to build them. And I, in my wisdom, maybe probably not in my wisdom at the time, said that if he didn't want to build them out, I would have great pleasure in withdrawing the approval, so he would have nothing. That was probably going well beyond my ability at the time, sir. But of course, if that gentleman had waited 3 years and hadn't built, he would have had to renew. And at that time, there's a possibility he may not have gained a renewed approval. But the point I'm trying to make, sir, is this, and I think there is a place to be, we could certainly look at a change in the planning laws to allow us that when, to allow us to say when we give an approval, that work is undertaken, and a good proportion of that work is undertaken after a certain period of time, because I am aware that you only need to dig a foundation trench on a site to show that you've got underway. So I thank Senator Mezek for prompting my memory, but it is a good idea, and maybe somebody should be looking at, as part of the delivery of homes for this increased population to live in, a means by making sure that actual approvals are built out. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak in the debate? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and call upon the Deputy of St Peter to respond, or to sum up, I should say.
Thank you, sir, and thank you to absolutely everybody for their contributions. It's been fascinating, and I thank everybody for the thought they put into it and their really, really contributions. It's there's so much there, it makes the job even harder, really, how to break all this one down and make sense out of it. But I really appreciate it. Thank you. As I said at the beginning and in the report, we're going to do call that a content analysis of this one, to go through the themes and document them and return them back to everybody in the Assembly, so we can really understand, the focuses and the reoccurring themes and the priorities that people have brought, both as the challenges and also as the solutions. So I've got pages and pages of notes and themes, and I could risk summarising them, but then I might miss out some of the others that are equally important that I'll be challenged for not including with the right level. But I'll try a bit. I mean, housing, and as Deputy Ward quite correctly said, homes, we're going to have to, Deputy Ward would like this, change the nomenclature. It's more than nomenclature, it's a fundamental difference, but I know he would like my use of the word. Young, old, unused. The young talent drain, how we support them, education, lifelong learning. We haven't put enough emphasis on young people's voices, and I will take the metaphorical slap on the wrist for that one and make sure that it is very much enhanced in the plan. It is there, but it needs more focus. Thank you, Deputy Pamplin. Data. Some concerns that we won't have the census data on time for the end of the year. That is a genuine concern. And then equality and how we value each other, work-life balance. I'll mention the productivity plan. I think Deputy Doublé requested some clarification on that. Productivity isn't just throwing more people at a problem in order to solve it. It's very much improving the productivity of the individuals, so fewer can produce more by the use of technology and artificial intelligence, adopting the new world, and that dovetails back to education, career changes, lifelong learning. It's all a very big challenge. Anyhow, I'm not going to waffle on. It's nearly 5:30. It's been a long day, and I just thank you all very much. Check your inbox for the report that comes out, and give me one little look around. No, and all I say, thank you, sir, for allocating time for this very important debate, and I appreciate everybody's contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy. That concludes the in-committee debate and public business for this meeting, and I invite the presumably the Deputy Chair of PPC, Senator Valois, to propose the arrangement of public business for future meetings. Senator?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm just getting the information up in front of me right now. So there have been 3 additional lodgings since the consolidated order paper. We have an amendment to the draft States of Jersey Police Force law, draft amendment of the standing orders, and we also have States of Jersey Development Company appointment of non-executive director. The 2 propositions in the amendment have all been listed for the next meeting on the 20th of April. And considering the number of items that are listed for the next meeting, it's likelihood of the debate going on for Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday for that period of time. Otherwise, if there's nothing else for anybody to change or add, I suggest that's the order of business and the time allocated for the next sitting, sir.
Thank you very much. Senator, does any member have anything to say about arrangements for future business? Well, if no member has anything to say, I will take this as a standing vote adopting the arrangements for future business. Very well, those arrangements are adopted and the Assembly stands adjourned until the 20th of April. Thank you very much.